Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at PureMTGO.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 131 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I'm your host, Christian, and I'm joined by our co-host, Brad.
What's up?
Before we got too far into this episode, I just want to remind everyone that Common Knowledge and all of the podcasts on the Constructive Criticism Network are sponsored by PureMTGO.com. If you would like to support the show, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Common Knowledge YouTube channel, and check out our Patreon. Let's get on with the podcast for the week.
Yeah, let's get on with it.
Yeah, actually, before we got super far into the main topic, I just wanted to give some thanks and a special announcement.
Ooh.
Our viewers probably noticed a pretty significant increase in quality last week. And that is because we have recently brought on an editor, Fernando Portelada.
A professional editor.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone's interested in talking to him or reaching out to him or anything, he knows a lot about Pauper and a lot about audio and visual editing. His @ on Twitter is IFPortelada, Portelada. Fantastic guy, and that couldn't have been done without the support of the viewers, but also we want to give a thanks to him real fast.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a great Pauper player. He's always down to chat Magic or podcasts. As much as I know, and I've talked to him on and off, mainly through Twitter, for a year and a half or so, and his big things are heavy metal, podcasts, and Magic the Gathering, so he fits right in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like the big three of a happy life.
Yeah. So yeah, we're happy to have him on. I think it'll make a pretty big difference.
We're, again, really excited to have him. But anyways, outside of that, what's been going on with you this week, my friend?
Not too much. I know we talked a little in the pre-show about work being a little chaotic, but nothing uncontrollable. The weather's finally broke, so that's nice. We're back down to normal June temperatures here in my neck of the woods, close to your neck of the woods, but not too much other than that. I think just work. Playing a little bit. I played a little bit more Magic Online this week than I normally do, but life stuff, not too crazy, which is good.
We actually saw your tweet about playing 10 matches in a row and then running into 2 Chatterstorm decks.
Yeah.
And getting frustrated with Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, it was just, it was too much. Well, that was 2 Chatterstorms after I had hit 1 or 2 Affinities in a row. It was just all a little too much.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand. Now, what deck were you playing?
I was going to get into that when we get into the what decks are we playing. If you wanted to hop there now, unless you had something going on outside of the Magic world you want to talk about?
Nothing too much. The weather here has been terrible in a good way, where I much prefer the heat as opposed to the cold.
Mm-hmm. That
being said, the Tennessee heat, and I think I mentioned this last week too, currently is like walking into a room where someone's been showering, just like really sticky, doesn't really feel good.
Yeah, it's gross.
So that'll break in about a month or so, but for now, it's not too good.
Yeah, I hate that. I'm the same way. I love the heat. I cannot stand the humidity.
Yeah.
So I'm the exact same way.
So what decks have we been playing this week?
I wrote actually a little bit more than I normally do, I think, because I played a lot more this week than I normally do. So if you want to go first, that's fine, or I can go first, however you want to do it.
I'll go ahead and go first. This week I've been playing a little bit more Chatterstorm. I'm sort of abandoned Affinity. I think Affinity is a lot of fun, and I think it's still the best deck, but I really wanted to play with the Storm deck because I think it'll get banned sooner.
Right. You want to get your licks in while you could.
Yeah, I think I'll probably play it in one of the challenges this weekend, either that or Affinity, but it's super busted. The amount of turn 2 and turn 3 wins that I've had the past couple of leagues that I've played are insane. The Blue-Black Delver matchup, I can't really figure out what's going on in it other than get lucky and win really quickly, which happens a lot. So I've been trying to think about that more. I haven't really came to conclusions yet, but I will.
So what is it when you're on the squirrel deck and you're facing a blue-black Delver or blue-black fairies? If you get past turn 4, you're just going to lose? Is that how that works? Like, you know what I mean? Is there like a threshold of when Storm will win against those decks and when it will not? Absolutely.
No, I think for me, I just don't really have the skill with the deck because I don't really play decks like this very often to know when it's time to go for it, how much hate can I play through, when should I start going for it, and when I see a few counterspells, maybe hold off for a few turns. Because, like, certainly the counterspells aren't going to go away, and especially in game 1, they're, like, I have very little interaction for it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what should the game plan be to get through that? And to me, a lot of it is, maybe try and start storming off, and then if they have any interaction, save a lot of those cards. And then the first time you go off, sort of build up to a big relay. That way you can go off for real the next turn and maybe fight through a few counterspells. But it seems like my opponents are really well timed with their dispels and counterspells and spell stutter sprites. So it's been sort of difficult for me.
You can look at the challenge results. That's why Blue-Black is still at the top. Got some great pilots, and that's clearly, it's always been one of the best decks. So it doesn't sound like it's completely unwinnable.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I think it's mostly me, but what about yourself?
As we mentioned, I actually got to play quite a bit of MTGO this week. Really frustrating, really kind of burned me out, the number of combo decks that I ran into. First of all, I was on Brute Squad. I don't know if you know much about Brute Squad or if the listeners do, but it was a deck created a few years ago, I believe, by brewer extraordinaire Deluxekoff, I believe. Basically, the whole strategy behind the deck is it's sort of a mini affinity list where you're running, it's more of a Metalcraft, like a white-blue Metalcraft list. You're running quite a bit of or a full package of your artifact lands, the original artifact lands, because obviously this deck was made before the new ones we got. And you're running things like Ardent Recruit and
like Glint Hawk and Gingerbrute and stuff.
Yeah, Gingerbrute, Glint Hawk, Auriok Sun Chaser, they get the Metalcraft bonuses, that sort of thing. And then you're running, the original deck had a full playset or a full package of Thoughtcast and of One Mind. So a full 8 draw spells there because you're running things like Flare Husk and Ornithopter and that sort of thing. It's really easy to turn 1, go like Ancient Den, Ornithopter, tap the Ancient Den for a Springleaf Drum, tap the Ornithopter and the Springleaf Drum for an Ardent Recruit, and boom, you got a 3/3 on turn 1. And that feels really good, and it looks really impressive, but in this meta, as crazy as it is to say, that's not very good, because A, you're almost hellbent on turn 1, and B, sadly, it's just a 3/3 that dies to a whole suite of removal that we have in the format now currently. But it's a fun deck. It's a really good deck. It also runs Harsh Sustenance, which is a drain spell equal to the number of creatures you have. It's one of my favorite spells pretty much ever. But I played with that original version for a while. I actually have it built in paper too, but I played with that for a while in MTGO, and I just kind of realized that it's too slow for the current meta because everybody's packing main deck, Echoing Truths and Echoing Decays and Fiery Cannonades and all this other stuff. So it doesn't recover well from board wipes, even with all the draw spells. It has a hard time. If you clear the board, they're pretty much sunk. So I thought it needed a little help. So I forget exactly what I took out of the original list, but I ended up putting in a full playset of Galvanic Blast and a full playset of the new Salamander. And that really helped out a lot. Main deck Galvanic Blast is huge. I added a couple of the new Modern Horizons artifact lands to give me that splash of red, give me a couple more artifacts. And it also runs, I don't know if I mentioned it, but it also runs Holdout Settlement. So you can tap a creature to get mana, kind of like a Springleaf Drum, but on a land. So I always had access to red mana, even when I wasn't running the artifact lands from Modern Horizons. But that turned out to be pretty good. It actually made a deck quite a bit stronger. It could be a fast deck, that's for sure. I want to say between the couple days I played this week, I probably played 15 to 20 matches with the deck, and I don't think I'd be exaggerating to say I won almost every single game 1 of every match because people aren't expecting it, and it's really fast, and even like if you're playing the new affinity, a well-timed Echoing Truth can really hurt them, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
but with Brute Squad or whatever you want to call it, this version of mine, because there's so many different creatures, even if you hit an Echoing Truth, you're only going to likely bounce like 2 guys, So it was pretty good. It won pretty much every game one, like I said, and then it's really easy to hate against because not only it sort of exposes itself, you can hate against weak creatures, and you can hate against artifact. But Glint Hawk was unimpressive. I remember when Glint Hawk was a beast up till about a year ago, and now it just seems like it's not doing a whole lot. And that decision was based because that was almost always the first card I sideboarded out to bring in my blue elemental blasts or whatever. But yeah, it's a good deck. It's a fun deck. I played against a ton of combo, and I got tired of it towards the end. It was so bad that I think one of the last matches I played before I logged out, I lost the die roll. My opponent went first, put down a Plains. It was my turn. I did all this fancy stuff on turn 1. I cast a Thraben Inspector, and in response, they tapped their Plains to cycle that 1-mana cycling dinosaur, from the cycling combo deck, and I just conceded the match. I was just done. Like, I'm out. See you later. It was just too much. Too much combo, too much storm. One of the big things I learned, and I don't know if I just knew this and forgot it or have never thought about it before, but Standard Bearer is really good in matchups that aren't Boggles. I pretty much won with this deck, with my version of the Brute Squad deck, I won a match against Blue-Black Fairies because of Standard Bearer. Any Echoing Decay they cast was going to go towards that, or Echoing Truth was going to go towards that. I won the second game. I don't think I won the match, but I won the second game against Skred because of Standard Bearer. Any of their targeted removal had to go towards that. Snuff Outs have to target Standard Bearer before they target anything else. I don't know. It was just kind of a boss. It was awesome.
Yeah, Standard Bearer is a really good card. And I'm pretty sure, I know that you already mentioned it, but against Boggle, don't they have to equip Standard Bearer with their...
everything? Yeah. Target creature.
Great card.
Yeah, that's pretty much the only reason Boggles brings in, I think, Gutshot, is to take care of Standard Bearers.
Yeah, the deck sounds awesome.
It is fun. It's not as strong, obviously. It's not even as strong as like pre-Modern Horizons 2 Affinity. It's not quite that strong, but it is fun if you're more, I don't know, it's just fun.
It's a little bit more aggressive, and certainly you get more draw twos that you could easily play than the older Affinity decks. I think what might be frustrating about it right now is that you play 1-mana 3/3s, and then your opponent can play 0-mana 4/4s in abundance. It's not like they just have 4 of them. They have a lot of card draw to get there. They have a lot of removal to hold you off till they get there. And I think that that's kind of frustrating, but I could see why somebody would want to play this deck and how they could have success with it. And hopefully after a couple of bans, we can revisit this conversation in a more positive light.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to keep it up. The mana base is kind of sketchy. The original list ran 14 lands. I'm running 15, which usually you can get away with because of Affinity. You just make stuff free or cheap or whatever. But there are some games I played against, I think it might have been a Chatterstorm deck or maybe Mono Black Control. I don't remember. But, well, in the first, I lost 0-2. I lost the first 2 games of the match in a total of 9 turns, and I saw 1 land, like, the whole time. There are times where you just lose. And that's all there is to it.
Like anything, that sort of variance can get you.
But the deck to me is fun enough to make up for the frustrating parts of it. So,
well, that's what we've been playing this week. You want to get on to the main topic for the week?
I do. Let's do it. Well, we're wrapping up our top 10 single pip colored list with the top 10 green cards for Pauper, completely based off our own 5 minutes worth of judgment.
And as always, our list is in no particular order.
Yeah.
It sort of just came down to the 10 cards that we agreed, decided that our disagreement in 1 or 2 spots on ranking didn't necessarily matter, so we decided to just talk about them in a random order.
Pretty much. So you can make up your own list, or you can make up your own order, because I'm sure you could put 100 players in a room and they'll all list them differently.
Yep, definitely. And, if you disagree with anything on our list, you can just let us know in the comments down below.
I think the best way to actually show your displeasure with our list is to sign up for our Patreon. Get us back with your wallet. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sign up to our Patreon, subscribe to the YouTube channel. While you're at it, also go subscribe to the Constructed Criticism YouTube channel. Visit puremtgo.com.
Let your hate subscribe.
But anyways, what's number 1 on our list?
Number 1 is one of the most popular, I haven't seen it too much lately, but one of the most popular green cards I know for sure after Commander Legends came out and Cascade and Ponza became a real thing. This one was probably one of the most played green cards in our format for a solid 6 months. It is Arbor Elf. It's a 1/1 elf druid for a single green, and its only ability is that you can tap it and untap the target forest.
That sounds like it's basically just another version of Llanowar Elves that requires somehow more setup.
But it's just a mana dork.
Yeah, no, it's really not, though, because, it does untap your forest. But with the new dual lands,
right,
that means that it can untap for other colors other than green. And then if you have any sort of enchantments on those lands, all of a sudden it's producing 2 and 3 mana. It grows really quickly with what it can produce. It leads to a lot of unfair things. You can play those big cascading creatures super early. You can play your multiple Ponza spells on turn 3.
Yep, and I think that's where it really shines is when you've got your extra land producers out, your enchantments, that sort of thing.
Yep, absolutely. And we sort of, buried the lead here with what number 2 on our list is.
Yeah, we did. We almost touched on it with our number 1. What is our number 2? This one's sort of split. I think it's almost cheating, but they're close enough.
Yeah, we put Utopia Sprawl, Abundant Growth. Basically, they enchant lands or forests, and whenever they enter the battlefield, you can choose a color, and basically your lands produce an extra mana. I think Abundant Growth just fixes the mana and you can draw a card, if I remember correctly. And, Utopia Sprawl is really the one that I'm partial to, because that's what produces the extra mana. With cards like Arbor Elf, can really get you going with, blowing up lands, casting big dinosaurs, big pirates.
A single forest with the Utopia Sprawl on it with an Arbor Elf can get you 4 mana right off the bat.
Yeah, and even if you don't have Arbor Elf, it has a lot of really good synergies with cards inside like Boggles and stuff like that.
And then typically you'll see Abundant Growth also in the Boggles decks, but a lot of times too in what they call kitty decks with Core Skyfisher to bounce it back and cast it again because it does draw you a card on ETB. So they are different enough cards. They probably should have been listed separately, but they're essentially, they're close enough. So
close enough. I didn't necessarily want to pick one over the other, but also wanted to talk about more cards that didn't do this. So what was up next on our list?
Number 3. I think when I started this list, I must have had a specific deck in mind that because I pretty much just listed most of the cards in the deck. Number 3 is going to be Annoyed Altasaur from Commander Legends. Let me pull that up because I don't very rarely cast that card. It is 5 colorless, or 5 generic and 2 green. Is that correct? 7 mana for 6/5 with Reach and Trample. But more importantly, it is with Cascade. So this lets you do all kinds of crazy stuff like Cascade into Boarding Party, which lets you Cascade into Deny Reality, which lets you Cascade. You can just keep going and going. But Altasaur is one of the key pieces to the new Jund list. That's why it was so popular. That's why it still is popular. You just get so much value out of it. If you have a way to give it haste, it can be a finisher. If not, it's still 6 power, 5 toughness with Reach and Trample. That's huge. Even without the Cascade, that's a decent value for Reach and Trample. But it's really that Cascade that pushes it over the top, I think.
A 7 mana card that produces 2 threats. One of those is going to be like one that is a must deal with for the vast majority of decks in Pauper. There are a few decks that don't struggle with it as much, like Elves can sort of get under it and go wide enough that it doesn't really matter. But for the most part, if you can land one of these guys, you're in pretty good shape.
You almost know the game's over when this hits the board, or when you even cast it. You just start cascading into craziness. That's what made the Jund deck so powerful. Is you would cast something like this, and then you'd hit off the Cascade, you would hit Thorn of the Black Rose, or you'd hit a Boarding Party. And then if you hit the Boarding Party, sometimes you'd Cascade again into like a Blightning, and then you just crippled your opponent completely. Very strong.
Super formidable card, the backbone of a lot of different Pauper shells.
But that's number 3. Basically 1, 2, and 3 were all one deck. So I think we need to move out of one deck territory. What's number 4, sir?
And number 4 moves into the one deck territory. And that's going to be Chatterstorm.
That sounds fine. 2 mana for a 1/1? That's okay.
For 1 green and 1 generic, you create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. This card does nothing else. In all actuality, the real danger of this card is Storm. Combos really nicely the first day of class to make a really great Storm deck. I don't really know what more I can say about the card other than Storm and Pauper is broken and probably shouldn't exist in any shape or size. As much as I hate to say that, because I like the idea of Storm decks.
Right.
But, even if this card isn't too powerful for Pauper, it alters the metagame in a way that I think is really unfun.
Right.
So other decks can accommodate for the power, So Chatterstorm might not be this unbeatable force like other Storm decks have been in the past, but it forces decks to play like 4 main deck Echoing Truth. It's just not a very fun metagame when you have to be doing something like that to be able to be, even be able to compete and then still end up losing.
I think it may have even been Fernando, but someone tweeted out recently that, and I've said it before too, that once the majority of your decks or the decks you see in challenges and online, once they start main decking sideboard cards, it's generally a bad sign for the format. Sure, even Echoing Decay you'll see as a one-of or whatever, and that's totally fine. It just doubles as a removal spell.
There's nothing wrong with a main deck Echoing Truth. I could see why in some metagames that's a really good decision, but it's so populous right now. And, you really see a 3-deck metagame, even in playing in leagues, I played a league the other night playing with Storm, where it was mirror match, affinity, blue-black Delver, blue-red Delver.
Oh my god. It just sounds like a wood chipper.
Yeah, it was fun, I like all of the decks involved. It would get really tiring if I played Magic as much as some other people did.
Yeah, as much as some of the grinders. Yeah. I'm okay losing, I don't think I place winning a game as high on my list or my priorities as I probably should. I'm okay losing. I don't care. If you're better than me or if I think I'm going to lose, I'll concede. I'll give you the match or whatever. I think it's the fact of sitting there for 10 minutes, click, 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 tap, this, watching you do it. Whereas opposed to if you and I were sitting across the table from each other and you're playing Chatterstorm and you just look at me and you're like, hey, I got it. I'd be like, all right. Let's go on to the next game. It's more of just an annoyance to play against.
Yeah, especially online. And I imagine, honestly, it would probably be even more populous if the metagame wasn't solely online.
Sure.
Right now, I know that Paper's starting to return here in the States in some areas, but I think Pauper is still mostly played online at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think I'm going to make it to the shop this Saturday, but probably next Saturday for sure for Pauper. I'll be surprised completely if we don't have at least one new Affinity or one Chatterstorm deck, assuming they're still legal.
Let's hope not. Up next, what card did we have?
We have another one that falls into sort of the same deck as the previous 2, 3 on the list. But this one is a little more versatile. This one sees play in just about every format that it's legal in. It was a nice addition in Modern Horizons 2, nice addition to that format. It's a very strong card. It was a very kind of a pricey card as well before this reprint. But this is another elf. It's an elf ranger. I think this was one of the first cards to get that ranger subtype. And it is Kyrian Ranger. For a single green, you get a 1/1 elf ranger. And its text is, return a forest you control to its owner's hand to untap target creature. Activate this ability only once each turn. This is a staple. I don't know about other formats, but this is a staple in Pauper, Mono Green, Stompy.
Yeah, Staple and Stompy, Staple and Elves. Those decks tend to play a really low land count, so getting multiple uses out of the same forest is powerful enough in and of itself. But, Mono Green Stompy, it allows you to untap some of your creatures so you can hold them back as blockers or produce more mana with them. And Elves allows you to use Timberwatch Elf to keep pumping certain elves, or keep using Well-Wisher over and over, or just keep making more mana with other elves. So, this one card could produce 2 extra mana for your deck that plays a really low land count, but needs a critical mass of mana.
Yep.
So it's really powerful, probably one of the biggest enablers in Pauper.
If we were actually doing a ranking of number 10 to number 1, this would probably be easily in the top 3 for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd probably put it at number 3 behind Chatterstorm and one other card we have not talked about yet.
The activate this ability only once each turn. That is each turn. So if you needed to, you could do it on your opponent's turn. Obviously do it on your turn. If you need to gain, like you were talking about with Well-Wisher or what have you. Timberwatch Elf, that sort of thing.
Those decks gain a lot of life really quickly because of this card.
Yeah, it's it can get out of hand real fast.
And up next, we have everybody's favorite enchantment.
Probably, I'd be willing to bet, outside of maybe Ethereal Armor and another one on this list, this might be the best green enchantment we have.
It is the best green enchantment we have. Card, of course, is Rancor. It costs a singular green. Enchanted creature gets +2/+0 and has trample. And when it is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return it to its owner's hand.
It's that last part, that last sentence is what makes this the best enchantment in Pauper. Easily the top 3 best enchantments in the format.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, with 1 mana, it gets down under your opponent's counterspells, usually. It gives a really strong buff to the creatures, but it just provides so much card advantage over the course of a long game that, you know, not only does this help close games quickly, but if you're not able to, then it's also going to be there for the long game.
Just about the only way this card's going to see the graveyard is if you have to discard it for some reason, or they destroy the creature you're targeting with it before it has a chance to resolve. That's pretty much about it.
Super effective card. Like I said, has the ability to dominate, take over games, help close them quickly. You're going to grind out your opponents with it. To me, all of that makes it the best green enchantment in Pauper.
And it's so strong on its own, too, that it has the potential to open up other archetypes. You know, white, green, heroic, and Gruul aggro of some sort. Just, black, green aggro even. So it can get pretty crazy. It's definitely a good one. And I love a good enchantment. I know that many people say enchantments are the worst type of card in Magic, but I love them.
Enchantments are great.
And they are. They're absolutely great. Speaking of enchantments, I think we have another one on the list.
Do we?
We are at number 7. This one you'll also see in decks that run the land enchantments, things like Boggles, and pretty much Boggles is where you're going to see this card, unless you're running a Brew. But it's very powerful. I think when we had our little interview about Historic Pauper, this card was brought up a few times as being busted, as being the card that's warping the format there on Arena. It is Ancestral Mask. For 2 generic and a green, you get an enchantment aura that says Enchant Creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each other enchantment on the entire battlefield.
Ancestral Mask, to me, the reason that it makes this list is because it is probably the defining card of an archetype in Pauper that has existed forever, and that's Boggles.
Yep.
You know, this card is really strong in Boggles, probably what makes Boggles playable in most metagames, and that's really all there is to it. You know, it's not a widely played card, but it upholds one of the usual pillars of the format to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And if your deck is built around it, you honestly really only need 1 or 2 of them, and it's going to close out the game. That's just going to be it. I mean, if you got a slippery boy with 4 or 5 enchantments on it, and you got a couple enchantments on your lands, and then all of a sudden you drop this, and it's a 18/18 or whatever, or more than that because of Ethereal Armor. It just gets nutty with Armadillo Cloak and everything else.
Absolutely. You know, I don't know if there's much more that I can say about this card other than literal backbone of an entire deck.
I would assume so, but does it see much EDH play? I would have to think it would, right?
I don't know if enchantments see much EDH play, like what this kind of card does, you know? I bet it sees a lot of play in those big Voltron strategies. I just don't know how popular those are.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So there's not like a Boggle EDH deck. I mean, I guess there could be. There's enough hexproof creatures out there, but...
Yeah, there's probably an everything EDH deck.
I just know I've been thinking a lot about Sithis from Modern Horizons 2. It's basically an enchantress, and I think it's green-white for the casting cost, and I've never wanted to build an EDH deck around a single creature as much as I do that one.
I don't know. If you are a Commander expert or somebody that plays Commander, let me know if I'm just disrespecting the format by saying Ancestral Mask is not good in the format.
I have to think that, you know, when it says each enchantment on the battlefield, I mean, you've got 4 people. It's the potential of a whole ton of artifacts. But, you know, if they're not being played, then Ancestral Mask isn't probably very good. But we are not the EDH podcast.
That is true. That being said, up next, we have Llanowar Visionary. 2 generic and a green. You get a 2/2 that when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and then it taps to add green.
So it's just a beefier mana dork that replaces itself, and I love it. This is another staple or backbone to the Jund list, if you will. You never feel bad hard casting this, and you never feel bad really cascading into it because it's always going to be value.
Yeah, it does everything. It replaces itself. It ramps. It's respectable in combat and Pauper. It's just a nice middling card. I know Packmate has sort of replaced it in a lot of lists, but I think there is a definite argument to be made that this card is better than Packmate. And, even in decks like Jund and stuff, this card could really see some play and really do some damage. And I think it's well deserving of the spot on the list.
When I put this one in here, it was actually between those two. It was between Visionary and Saruf's Packmate. And this is the one I landed on. I don't know if I can explain it as well as you did or add anything extra to it. This one just felt like the better choice.
I agree. I think that this card is better on this list, even if it's not always strictly better.
So we are up to number 9, sir.
What's the 9th card?
This one sees play mainly in Tron,
Boo.
but it's got applications all over the place. Yeah, Boo is correct. I play it in my Landfall deck. It's got applications pretty much anywhere that you care about your lands, and it is Corrupt Rotation. For a single green, it's an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you sacrifice a land, but you search your library for a land card, put that card onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. Notably, it just says land card. It doesn't say basic land card, so you can sacrifice a forest to go get your third Tron piece if you're missing it, or pretty much whatever you need.
It can tutor out the Juka Bogs and stuff like that in a pinch.
And it's instant speed, too, so it's a pretty big player, and my red-green landfall deck is a nice little combat trick, that sort of thing.
The power of a card that lets you search your library and put something into play is always huge, regardless of the card type.
Yep, regardless of the card type or format. And we don't have a lot of those effects in Pauper, and it's just nice that it's in green.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
I like it.
It's a super good card, really good utility card, usually gets Tron lands, but I digress.
And it's just one of those cards that's going to forever be popular. I mean, it's been printed about 7 or 8 times, and it's still $1 or more per copy. So people want it. People still play with it. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we got one more to round out the old top 10 here.
Our 10th and final card is our second card with the Storm keyword. This is Weather the Storm.
This is our more fair of our Storm cards.
Yeah, although, ban it. For a generic and a green, it's an instant with the text, you gain 3 life, Storm.
I've never cast it or been on the opposite side of someone casting it where they just gain 3 life.
No, definitely not. This card is probably the best sideboard card in green, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. This card is always a generic in green. Gain 9 life.
Mm-hmm.
Gain 12 life. Reset your life total. That can be backbreaking for a lot of decks, especially very fast, aggressive decks. It's just pretty rough. But we've managed. Modern Horizons 1 didn't break the format as much as Modern Horizons 2, even with Astrolabe, but that's where Weather the Storm came from. It's been around since.
I think probably the most fun thing to do is to let your burn opponent play 2 burn spells, then you counter the second one, and then they hit you with another one, and then you gain 15 life. It's fun.
I gotta go. I gotta go.
This podcast ship is over.
We are done. Yeah, I can see how that's fun if you're not the burn player. And that's the thing, too, about Weather the Storm. If you want to think of it in a worse way, it's basically every instance of you gaining life is you're just negating every lightning bolt, every chain lightning, every rift bolt that they've cast for the entire game.
Absolutely it is.
I've had that happen many times.
But yeah, that's our top 10 list.
Yeah, if you have any extras that we missed out on, let us know on Twitter or comments or wherever you guys can reach us out at. We'll throw some more on the list, see what you guys got.
But I guess now we can get on to the Q&A portion of the show.
All right. We got a couple of them this week. I can start out with this first one if you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just typed it basically exactly how it was phrased. This comes from Bandy Andy, and they ask, are there any lessons/ideas you think Pauper content creators could borrow from other content creators?
I couldn't think of particular lessons, because generally I am of the opinion that you should always be borrowing from your peers in a space like this. You know, if there is something that you like, you should just do it.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too, and Magic content's not the only content I've ever made. But every time I've made content for any other topic or any other field, it's always the same thing. Make the content that you would want to read. Make the content that you want to watch or that you want to see or listen to or read. But yeah, like you were saying, take little bits. Maybe you don't like the way person X, Y, and Z writes articles, but you love the way they format their deck lists. Just little stuff like that. It could be anything. I think one of the big ones is consistency. You know, don't be a waffler. Don't be a big shot. Don't, try to be consistent with your content. That's a big one as well. But yeah, just borrow. I don't think it's stealing unless you legitimately steal their logo or their theme music or what have you. But yeah, I think you can learn a little bit from everybody out there. And I don't think it's just Pauper either. There's a lot of podcasts I listen to that are, sure, they're Magic the Gathering, but they have nothing to do with Pauper. But I love the way they did their intro music, or I love the way they did transitions, or the guests they bring on, just that sort of thing. Content is content, as far as I'm concerned.
There's a podcast that I listen to where they talk about video games, and specifically the video games industry and making video games. And they do a section that I really loved, and I think we naturally just started doing it in our show at the beginning, where we catch up on a week, where they just randomly do a segment in the middle of their show that's just a random thing that happened to one of us this week. And it's love it, because it really helped the personal connection. And then, like I said, we naturally just started doing it, but that's something that you could easily borrow. Is just let your viewers know that you have lives outside of the thing that they're there for, because oftentimes they're also there for who you are as a person, and they like you.
Yeah, I've turned off and unsubscribed to many podcasts that were of topics of interest to me, but I just didn't like the hosts or whatever. I mean, it's a matter of personal taste. But yeah, always be learning, always be borrowing, whatever.
Up next, we have a very much meta-level question from friend of the show, Al X. They want to know, have we ever considered having a Zoom panel of community members to discuss broader topics like format, health, progression, etc.?
I can honestly say I've never considered it, but I like the idea.
I do this every day on Twitter.
I am this question.
I've never really considered it. I don't know necessarily if it's my place to host or get something like this started, but I do think it is a good idea in theory. I think it could be a lot of fun, so long as you got the right people that gelled well together and maybe had some ground rules and everybody knew exactly what the topics were beforehand. It would probably be a lot of fun.
Yeah, just a big round table sort of thing. Even if it was not even necessarily a regular podcast thing, but once a month or once every 6 weeks or a couple months, if those 4 to 6 or 8 people or whatever got together and live streamed their conversation on Twitch, kind of get the community involved, see what they're talking about. I think it's a great idea, actually. I don't know. I wouldn't go into it with the idea that, we're going to solve things and we're going to fix the format, but just sort of, just touch on it, state of the format address, as it were. Yeah, it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like we have Uno Mas question here. This one came from Twitter, from Zubats. How would you change the format, or how would the format change if sideboards were not allowed? Well, I'll tell you right now, Brute Squad would be tier 0, because that deck wins every game 1. As long as you don't have a chance to sideboard, that deck wins.
It's interesting because, the clear answer appears that people would start playing sideboard cards in their main deck. But then you would just sort of run into this problem of then maybe, Boggles is the best deck for a couple of weeks because people are playing, a bunch of anti-artifact hate and a bunch of Storm hate and no Boggles hate because they can't fit that and still have a functioning deck. I don't know. Questions like this are always really hard to me because it's sort of like those events that you used to do. What I would guess is sort of close to what happened, but I could never actually predict those metagames that happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was always very surprising, very impressive. But I think you pretty much touched on it. I think it would be very much impossible to predict. I think it would be, let's just say, like you said, your example, Boggles runs rampant for a week, so everyone packed Enchantment Hate, and then all of a sudden Affinity is the best for a week, so everyone packs Artifact Hate, and then all of a sudden Mono Black Control. It would literally be a one-deck format every week.
To me, the concept of sideboarding is probably what makes these competitive card games so good. And, not just Magic, but any game with something like this, it's just good. I play a fair bit of a game called Legends of Runeterra, and something that I miss in that game is the ability to swap a few cards out in my deck based on matchups.
Sure.
Especially like in the constant laddering of an online card game like that, I think it would probably make that game a fair bit more fun, but it would also change the game drastically.
Yeah, sure.
Into being something that it's not. So,
what do you think about the idea of, say, WotC just abandoned sideboards altogether? Do you think in any format, any 60-card constructed format, they just said, nope, no more sideboards? So do you think without sideboards, Pauper would end up being like a 75-card main deck format?
no, I don't think so. Certainly, maybe some decks would play like a few more cards. Any deck that's playing like those toolboxy cards like Crop Rotation or Mystical Teachings might play it. But truthfully, a lot of times, the strictly best thing is to just have the best version of your deck with a few flex slots sort of dedicated towards stopping other decks. I don't know. And there are formats without sideboards, like Canadian Highlander is one that comes to mind, which is 100-card singleton. They have no ban list, but they have like a points format. You can have like...
Yeah, they have a certain amount of points they can spend on their deck list or something like that.
Yeah, and they have a really diverse metagame. There's not too much targeted hate, but there's a little bit in every deck for every type of card, I guess is how I'd put it. Truthfully, cards like a Braid really help bridge this gap.
Sure.
Where you could always main deck a Braid and not feel bad about it.
Yeah, 2 or 3 of them even.
Mm-hmm. And, if Pauper didn't allow sideboards, you'd probably see a lot of stuff like that.
Yep.
Where, like, the white card that pumps your guy, gains life, or destroys an artifact or enchantment.
Yeah, Light of Hope.
Like, that card would probably see more play in white decks that are creature-based. A Braid is probably going to see maybe even, like you said, 3 or 4 of play. And truthfully, you can never really know.
No, honestly, you can't. It's definitely just a thought experiment, as they say.
Maybe that would be a fun little thing to do is, hey, everybody, we're going to be playing matches this weekend. No sideboards allowed. Bring your best Pauper deck.
That's even a tournament we could run on Cards Realm or something. Some sort of free Pauper, no sideboard tournament, Wild West. Let's go.
Yeah, and if you would be interested in something like that, let us know on Twitter.
They were a little difficult to manage at times, but if you want the singleton tournaments to come back, let us know. If you have any other ideas for interesting Pauper constructed tournaments, let us know. We'll try to figure out a way to run them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm always down with stuff like that.
But I guess that's going to do it for this episode of Common Knowledge. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find me on Twitter at JessGuyDad. Brad, where can they find you?
At Pauper_B on Twitter and BradDrackV on MTGO.
Or you can shoot us an email over at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. If you guys have any questions on the Pauper format, MTGO, anything else, email us, leave a comment down below, reach out on Twitter. Thanks again to our sponsor, PureMTGO.com, as well as the Constructed Criticism Network for letting us be a part of it. And last, but certainly not least, thank you for listening. Take very good care of each other.
And never stop brewing.